In a similar fashion there's a difference fundamentally between a world government and a planetary organism. Okay? So the planetary organism versus the world government is that the world government is made up of the sort of mafia that we've been talking about. The Israeli, Russian, and the general European sort of mafia of money and power and control, the people who are behind Biden, who are behind the Great Reset, who are behind essentially the status quo, is the world government. They are trying to create a world that is totally dominated and controlled, and our data that is generated by the technocracy that they plan to create, all of that data that we are generating will be the capital, essentially, of their future system in a stakeholder capitalist system, which I've heard described as basically the equivalent of a serfdom management system, where you will own nothing and be happy. Isn't that great? Okay, so, and what I wanted to read initially was this first passage from Dictatorship to Democracy. And what it essentially says here, let me get to what it essentially says here is, in extreme cases of social, political, economic, and even religious institutions of the society, and this is in reference to tyranny, we're entering a state of tyranny, and in extreme cases, the social, political, economic, and even religious institutions of the society outside of the state control have been deliberately weakened, subordinated, or even replaced by new regimented institutions, vis-a-vis Google, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, etc. The population has often been atomized, turned into a mass of isolated individuals unable to work together to achieve freedom, to confide in each other, or even to do much of anything at their own initiative. Does that sound like a time period we may be experiencing today? I don't know. The result is predictable. The population becomes weak, lacks self-confidence, and is incapable of resistance. People are often too frightened to share their hatred for the dictatorship and their hunger for freedom, even with the family and friends. People are often too terrified to think seriously of public resistance. In any case, what would be the use? Instead, they face suffering without the purpose and a future without hope. Short-lived mass protests and demonstrations may have occurred. Perhaps spirits soared temporarily. At other times, individuals and small groups may have conducted brave but impotent gestures, asserting some principle or simply their defiance. Have we not done that in recent times? I feel like this is sort of literally talking about right now in our history. However noble the motives, such past acts of resistance have often been insufficient to overcome the people's fear and habit of obedience, a necessary prerequisite to destroy the dictatorship. Violent rebellions can trigger brutal repression that frequently leaves the population more helpless than before. Guerrilla warfare rarely ever benefits the oppression. The hard truth, ultimately, is that one must strengthen the oppressed population themselves in their determination, self-confidence, and resistance skills. One must strengthen the independent social groups and institutions of the oppressed people. One must create a powerful internal resistance force. One must develop a wise, grand strategic plan for liberation and implement it skillfully. That's all I wanted to read from Dictatorship to Democracy by Gene Sharp. Now, this book, I think, should be standard reading. Should be standard reading for all people who are involved in any kind of movement for freedom. And so should the book Propaganda by Edward Bernays. Now, in his first chapter, he says, Organizing Chaos is the chapter, and it is the conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country, of any country, truly. We are governed, our minds molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. This is a logical result of the way in which our democratic society is organized. Vast numbers of human beings must cooperate in this manner if they are to live together as a smoothly functioning society. What a great ideal. Everybody just complies without any resistance whatsoever. Wouldn't that be wonderful for Bill Gates and all the rest of the globalist elite who are trying to create the technocratic dictatorship that will enslave us all? Okay, so then the other sort of excerpt I wanted to read is from Murder by Injection by Eustace Mullins. This book is the story of the medical conspiracy against America. He also, interesting fact, only ever took any of his research from anywhere else but the Library of Congress. So the legitimacy of his claims are self-evident in the source from which he attained all this information. I'm not going to read that one just because of the controversiality of it right now. But the reality is the Rockefeller institutions and the sort of money powers have great interest in destabilizing our society with these kinds of lies and these kinds of boogeymen. Ooh, we got to be scared of the invisible enemy that we are going to use propaganda to make you think that it's a war. Because that's all our tribalistic minds are supposed to be able to understand. Because we're simpletons, mind you. We're all a bunch of, Homo domesticus. Mm-hmm. Homo domesticus. So it's very important that we be domesticated as possible for the Homo oppressus, which is the higher species of man controlling society and government and the world at this point. So the idea essentially is, okay, that's the difference between world government and a planetary organism, is it's the mirror image in a planetary organism. You don't have propaganda controlling society in a planetary organism, as I would define it. If it's going to be an organism, it has to be organic. It has to be something that is not controlled from the top down, not something that is regimented, and essentially all that it is a giant bureaucracy. If we have a society that's actually self-governing, it in and of itself is by far more of a free and progressive society and system. Progress means everyone educating and governing themselves. Not big daddy government and big mommy government telling you where to go and how to live and what you got to eat and how much of it you got to eat, and essentially taking complete control over every idiosyncrasy of life itself. That is what the Klaus Schwabs of the world would like for us, because they know for with great certainty that we're just a bunch of higher mammals. We are Homo domesticus. Okay? We're not Homo oppressus. Homo oppressus knows best. Homo oppressus always knows best. And unfortunately, the reality is, and it's one of the other books, I kind of didn't want to bring this up, but this is this is also a treasure here. A Tragedy and Hope by Carol Quigley. And in this book, he basically talks about the history of the Cecil Rhodes secret society, essentially that is involved in the financial elements of how this world is controlled.
The British Empire.
The British Empire and the East India Company. Mm-hmm. And the legacy wealth of that corporation still exists in families, and it's still relevant to this day.
Oh, here's a fun fact. They used a lot of the money that the British Empire raised off of the opium wars and opium trade in China to start all of the Ivy League colleges and therefore secret societies that are run out of them with their money.
Right. So and thus to spread their civilization throughout the world. Mm-hmm. And in all actuality, it's not a civilization. And what they do is they restrict information and keep it for the secret society sort of higher echelon elements because they're afraid. This is the fundamental reality of that aspect of our species, which is that there is a huge deep darkness that is also, at a metaphysical level, there is light and dark. And it is the Thanatos and the Eros, the life and death instinct. And the people who are carried or driven by the death instinct, the fear instinct, are compelled to withhold information, to restrict and to create boundaries of entry into the hierarchy that they themselves both create and represent. And they embody as well. This is why they have to have ornate sort of clothing in a sense of, I am this thing that is beyond human. I am now Homo oppressus. And this is sort of the nature of it. They do truly believe that their role is a natural order in the scheme of things, and that they have a right to be there beyond anyone else's right. And so but the reality is that spiritually speaking, they're wrong. We all have, the deepest part of me is the deepest part of them. There is no difference between a human being and a human being.
I would actually argue that they are mostly psychopaths.
Oh,
and
yeah, sure.
probably spiritually underneath
Right.
most humans.
And that's the fear aspect of it, I'm sure, as well, because they fear the fact of, if everybody knew who I really was, I'm pretty sure they'd fucking kill me. But of course, they use the power that they've gained. See, the thing is, they understand more deeply, however, and are more capable of accepting their relationship to the spiritual nature of the world, which is that the deepest part of themselves is a spark of God. That there is an inherent truth to the king, the royalty of humanity, but it isn't something that can be isolated as an individual trait in one specific person.
Right.
It's something that is inherent as an essence in us all, and what they've done is try to say, no, it's not in you, no, it's in me, only in me. This is solipsism, essentially, is the belief that only I possess the good and the true and the beautiful,
Or any.
you or any true quality of like closeness to God, and you are some useless eater that must be controlled and domesticated.
But do you really think that, say, Bill Gates believes that Bill Gates is a good person? Like, I find that extremely hard to believe that he would see
It
himself
takes-
that
He's
way.
better.
It takes a certain amount of mental gymnastics.
Superior to us, certainly, but yeah, I guess I feel like when you're not really on the psychopath or sociopath spectrum, it's hard sometimes, like, to wrap my head around how a person like lives with themselves, like who
They
has
see
committed
what they're
so
doing
much
as a
death
higher
and
good.
destruction.
It's like you save you kill 900 people to save 1 million.
Yeah, right.
This is their rationality. Unfortunately, what they've done is they've abused the rationality element of their consciousness to perform a mental gymnastic sort of rationalization of the evils that they're committing. The reality is that in order to, from their perspective, you have to limit the population in order for the human species to be sustainable and for there to be a quality of life that is decent for all humanity. The problem is they're not doing it through education. They're not doing it through ethical means. They're doing it out of and honestly, it's the same kind of means as war and all these other things.
Eugenics.
They're doing it for essentially to limit our herd, to cull the herd.
Yeah.
And so the reality is that there is a huge element of truth, perhaps, to this. The sense.
I don't think that I think overpopulation
There's-
is a myth.
To a certain,
Right.
I think to a certain, I mean, like if let's say there had never been any wars and the human population had just been able to expand and expand, inevitably there would be a culling naturally. So what it is an artificial culling, like burning the bottom brush initially. And so how they're viewing it, I believe, from their own perspective, because they don't think that they're evil. They actually are viewing their actions as a kind of mercy,
Benevolent.
a benevolent sort of mercy upon humanity to artificially burn the bottom brush so that it is more fertile and capable of sustaining
For
life.
the smart people.
Right. We get to be able to decide that, by the way.
Yeah.
You know, like so this has to be something, and so that's why education is so fundamental. And so what my minutes here is that school versus education. Okay, school versus education is the same sort of dynamic as world government versus a planetary organism. School is the world government version of how we learn and how we're supposed to learn. And education is actually something which draws out the latent and innate talents of the individual and it actually enables them to be their best version of themselves, because that's what we're here to be, is like little puzzle pieces, and when we all piece together, we create a tapestry that is the brighter future that we want to create. But when we are limited and we're told you can only go into that, go that way, compartmentalize this guy and put him over there, and blah 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 blah. We're all, it's like a mailing slot. We're all just like and cubicle A, blah blah blah, you know. And so what we're not able to do is experience ourself holistically. Who am I? What am I? Where am I? Why am I? We don't have, and those questions are, if anything, restricted from us. The television entertainment sort of system is kind of a way to limit our ability, and it was invented by the German government, by the way, during the Nazi era. Essentially, was the television. Is the Fernsehen in their language, but essentially it's to see far, to be able to, you know. So, but television was a huge propaganda machine. I mean, for Christ's sake, you can't create a more powerful propaganda mechanism than to give people televisions, and so.
It was designed to tell you a vision.
Tell you a vision, yeah. Well,
their vision.
Right, to tell you a vision and program you. And to program the robot that is desired by the status quo is for us to be more like robots. And this is sort of the technocratic sort of system that's rolling out and continuously reveals itself subtly, slowly, but it inevitably shows itself. Honestly, you know, it's kind of funny because there have been people who tried to warn us of this technocracy, of this technological dictatorship. One of them being, Ted Kaczynski? Ted Kaczynski, the technological slavery. And you have to admit, I mean, his means of trying to get his ideas across were a little bit sketchy, perilous, or precarious. But Ted Kaczynski is the Unabomber.
Oh.
The Unabomber. Okay. And what his whole philosophy behind being the Unabomber was actually to tell people that the technological slavery is coming, and we're literally witnessing the manifestation of that technocracy, that dictatorship, as we speak, which is inspirational, because it also means that out of this darkness we will inevitably be exposed to the light, which I believe happens to be education, the self-governing force of philosophy, everyone becoming their own philosopher. And that is the true progressive standpoint, is to become self-governing by everyone sort of becoming their own philosopher, their own authority in their own life. Teach a man to fish. Exactly. So all children are born free. This is an inherent quality of the human spirit. It's an inalienable trait. It's an essence. It's not a right. It's something that we're all born with inherently.
Do you think the interjection of money in general has become like a kind of a wild card, a synthetic wild card in like the evolutionary process?
I think that it's like, I have a theory of economics. It's called the cloud theory. And so first we start out with a ball of solid ice, and that is the gold and coin, sort of currency, money, as it was originally thought of. Then gradually that ball of ice melts into a liquid, which is the fiat currency, liquidity, they call it. And to the point where inevitably that liquid becomes, the world starts to heat up. The world starts to heat up because of the very processes of the evolution of humanity itself. It starts to evolve, and that liquid starts to become a gas, a vapor. The vapor currency is the digital Bitcoin sort of currency. And as that evolves, and as society evolves with the concept that you don't need to have a tangible means of exchange any longer, it reaches a cloud. The cloud is a trust-based economic system, and I can now, this was sort of leading into this book here, which happens to be by myself, Matthew B. Holbert. The book Philosophia Solutions, which I'm actually going to be reading an excerpt from another book, and the book is Trust, Self-Interest and the Common Good, Oxford Press, 2008, Marek Kahn, so the quote is here: interacting parties must see themselves as a network of exchange. Let me read that again. Interacting parties must see themselves as a network of exchange. The basis of exchange is reciprocity. The existence of a network allows reciprocity to become fluid. A can scratch B's back without trusting B to scratch A's if A is confident that C or D or other initial will come along to do the scratching. Trust needs to be the true form of currency. We become the currency. And trust is the means by that sort of fluidity of exchange. Instead of it being a I can give you this. Do you want this? Yeah. Now he owes me a favor or something to that. We don't need to necessarily have this form of exchange. I'll take that, thank you. We can have trust. We can have trust among ourselves that we will do the sort of economic, what essentially a dollar bill is a certificate of trust that I've worked to get this in society, right? Mm-hmm. So what ultimately is coming to pass is that they're trying to create with the Great Reset, a system where everybody is just completely regimented and controlled to be forced to make the currency of that. We won't have money anymore. It'll be a cashless society, but we'll be compelled. There's no trust involved. See? Mm-hmm. They don't trust you enough to just do it, and then your very life will be dependent upon this system, this economy. Mm-hmm. Instead of the whole of society essentially creating the economy, the sort of ethic of life where we all share and create abundance.
Marketplace, kind of. The
sort of the marketplace. Mm-hmm. It can be truly a pure marketplace, but only if we have trust and love. If we don't have those two components, and beauty is also a fundamental component. If we don't have those three components, then we don't have the ability to actually create a world organism. And that needs to, I believe, needs to be the goal, to oppose a world government. The only way that we're going to make the world government of the technocracy irrelevant is by making a completely new economic order through philosophy, essentially. And that is the base. So the basis of this also it's very fundamental. If you don't have the philosophy of this, the education part of it down, you can't create the economy. You cannot create the economy of that kind of system. And so with the political system, if you don't have the political system in coherence with that, you're going to have problems. They're going to fuck you up. They're going to kill you. They're going to fight for their survival. Mm-hmm. So it has to be a multifaceted transition I think the fundamental sort of root of it is education, ultimately, because without the education you can't have the politics or the economics. So that's the sort of the starting point to creating that sort of overall overarching system, which that's essentially the purpose of this book, is to detail that whole process or that whole system altogether, the politics, the economics, and the education. That's what this is about. Also the metaphysics and essentially why it's important that we do this. Because if you don't have a soul, if you don't have a spirit that's connected to a higher entity, that essentially you're a robot. You can be manipulated and controlled. If you don't recognize that you have the Spirit of God within you, then you can be turned into a lump of clay that they can just manipulate and say, well, he just didn't know the rules, so we had to incarcerate him. And that's the reality.
It feels like we're surrounded by that.
That's
on a daily basis. That's the kind of thing I feel like I interact with the most.
Yeah.
It's just that energy of just like
total
autonomous, like just move forward type mentality, not really thinking very clearly or critically about anything.
Right,
You know what I mean?
and one of the things that I've realized in my own journey of philosophy is that this is essentially the highest form of sort of a RPG game in a lot of ways, and that if we are God experiencing reality through these avatars, video games are actually a metaphor for reality, and if they are a metaphor for reality, then we have the ability to alter the game, the rule set, the entire sort of paradigm, and turn it into something far more entertaining for us. If we're going to be God experiencing reality through this sort of evolutionary path, then why create this?
Mm-hmm.
Why? Why allow ourselves to be put into this kind of position where Homo oppress us is just going to continue to oppress us? And we can't make the game a hell of a lot more fun for ourselves and re-embrace the essence of adventure and of essentially self-mastery, which is another
Self-remedy, yeah.
self-mastery, which is also another book that I would like to share, which is Man Master of His Destiny. And really this is actually what I would consider to be Christian Hermeticism, which Hermeticism is kind of a pre-Christian philosophy, spirituality that existed in Egypt, and before that was adopted throughout the different religions. The Old Testament sort of has elements of the Hermetic teachings in it, but it's really Hermeticism at its essence is the belief that mind is God, mind. That there's a big mind, and that we are microcosmic versions of that big mind, and that we are sort of representations of that mind.
We can dip into it and download.
We can do that. That's part of what my book is about. Is that I have expanded the Hermetic principles from 7 to 13, and originally it was Mark Passio who defined the 8th, care. Care is the 8th Hermetic principle, but there's 13 from what I've come to recognize. The 13 are one of them is disclosure. That there is a tendency for this mind to be like, hey, there's a big mind. Mm-hmm. There's this guy. It'll be through a woman, a man, but some kind of incarnation that will tell you, hey, look, there's this thing. You can't really point to it, but there is this thing, this mind that's at the center of all of this. And even physicists have had to reconcile the reality of this. Max Planck and others. I mean, it's a fundamental nature of reality. What my take on it is that consciousness is a function of space and time, and so it's something that it exists before, it exists at the very atom, from atom to atom. Consciousness exists and is influencing the nature of reality, but it integrates itself more and more as the development and complexification of the organism evolves.
And so you're then kind of getting to a point where human beings are kind of like an antenna for consciousness.
Essentially, yes. We are like a television. We receive consciousness, and the more complex the brain is, the more capable it is of receiving this nature of reality, this sort of force which we call consciousness. And this is the reason why that it's such a hard problem in neurology and in explaining the brain and how it functions. It's like how does consciousness become generated by the brain? It doesn't make sense because it's not happening. The brain doesn't inherently have consciousness to it, and my evidence to that would be when you get blacked out drunk. You can reduce consciousness by tampering with just by chemical interruption. So consciousness is not inherent to the brain. It's not just a chemical process, and you could say that it's because of you're reducing the chemicals that it's well no, because you can also be knocked out or other things like there's other but when you're a very young child, the activity of your brain is such that you don't have memories, and then eventually you become a 3-year-old and you already know your whole family's names. The identity. Yeah, and that is the other thing is that identity politics is this sort of absurdity because it's ego. It has nothing, or personality. It has nothing to do with identity. Identity is the consciousness. When you say identity, you don't mean the personality or the persona. You mean the I amness. And that is not a mask. That is the wearer of the mask, but that is not the mask itself. And so we have this idea that, I identify as this or that, and the reality is you don't even know what identity means. You really don't. Because if you did, you'd realize that what you're doing is playing an ego game of a personality, which is the rainbow. You've given in to the illusion of the rainbow, which is to say that there's this variety. Yes, of course there's an inherent variety, but the underlying reality and truth is that it is a pure white light that is making all of that possible. The pure white light is God. The pure white light is consciousness, is mind, and that is the inherent nature of the true spirit of Christ and Buddha and the whole sort of pantheon of religious, spiritual concepts. That is the esoteric truth behind all of these exoteric belief systems and traditions and sort of regimentations about how you're supposed to reach this thing, which is inherent to your very nature. You don't have to, you're trying to where is this guy? Oh, we have to find God. I'm so scared without God.
Supermarket sweep.
and here you are with the very thing that you were terrified to live without. And this is why I think that God is a prankster. God is actually the biggest prankster that we could possibly imagine. For one thing, we start out as babies. We're supposed to reach this sort of level of godhood and enlightenment in Christ. But we start out as babies. The beauty of that. It's so simple and so true. And it reveals in and of itself. That is the disclosure. That is part of the disclosure, is that we are born infants. Totally defenseless and expected to reach a level of godhood that is almost unattainable, unimaginable to the average person who just sort of wakes up into this. And so that is sort of a part of the beauty of it, is that it's not totally hopeless. There is a certain amount of disclosure to the truth and the veracity of these kinds of ideas, that there is actually a lot of reality to it. So that's one of the Hermetic principles that I've sort of added. It's one of the 13. Now, what I've also done in my work is to expand the liberal arts. There are 7 liberal arts. The trivium is the trivium is grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium is math, geometry, music, and astronomy. And this was what created the Renaissance, essentially, was when this education system, or this art of education, was embraced by the masses of the Europe during the sort of end of the Middle Ages. There flowered this renaissance of intellectualism because of the works of Aristotle and sort of the prehistory or the ancient sort of classics. Now, what I've done is, like I said, I've added a considerable amount to that. And what it is I call the Ivium. This class that we're all sharing in is essentially the class on the Ivium. What I'm trying to essentially say is that there is an aesthetic that is inherent to the human organism that can make it optimized. There is an actual condition that we can reach, art and beauty, surrounding ourselves with things like the fractal geometry, and a part of it is sort of an embrace of the beauty of nature in defiance of this technocratic dictatorship, which Chet was trying to tell you, essentially, like a Brave New World. You need to be afraid of nature. You don't have the ability to withstand a cold. Let us give you a vaccine instead, and then you will be one of us. So the Borg, the resistance is futile. Okay, resistance is, and the only reason they will ever tell you that resistance is futile is because it's not futile. That's one of the fundamental things that we have to recognize.
It's the only way forward.
It's the only way forward. You have to go through the prompts in the video game. If you don't answer the guy in the car, the car's not gonna move, because you have to push go or yes or no, and that's all they're gonna try to make it is a sort of a switchboard kind of situation where yes or no. Will you push the button to electrocute your friend, or will you be put in jail? okay, well, which decision, which one are you going to choose? And so the Univium is composed of, as I said, a certain number of there's all the way up to Hexivium. Okay, so the Ivium is composed of 6 stages itself, and that's only because of the limitations that I have gotten to. I'm sure it can be expanded, but it starts with an aesthetic. The aesthetic is something that it's kind of paradoxical because it doesn't exist today. We don't have the Univium right now. We haven't created the more beautiful world that we could inhabit, that we could create together. The Univium is both the first stage and the last stage, essentially, because we have to still create this world. But the Univium is the aesthetic of that world that we want to create. It's our goal. It is the beauty that we need to aspire to. And by imagining that beautiful world, we bring it into ourselves. We bring that beauty into ourselves. And that's actually a part of this book that the Mastering Man, Master of His Destiny. When someone tunes into what is perfect, be it perfection of intelligence, power, form, color, perfume, or beauty, he benefits from that perfection because he introduces it into his own being. This is an infallible law, and from the first moment that you know it, you can no longer rid yourself of the idea of perfection without feeling that you are destroying something in yourself. That is an important realization to make, because if we actually just start imagining this more beautiful world, we then it sort of affects our mind to the point where we actually internalize it, and then by internalizing it, as within, so without, we create it, and we have the more of a willingness and an ability to create it.
It sets a higher standard for us.
It sets a higher standard, and by that higher standard, we can live and walk the talk of our own sort of what we would consider maybe a evolution in this process of resisting a tyrannical system, which is by definition of a dictatorship to democracy. We're living in the most extreme case of dictatorship.
The most extreme case yet.
Yeah, exactly. We're still.
They can always outdo themselves.
They can always outdo themselves, right? Exactly. So a part of that. Okay, so a part of that whole process. I'm going to skip ahead. Now there's Univium. Bivium is the second stage of this, which is a component of the aesthetic, which is part of his idea lexicon, where we show children ideas of like diffusion of energy, states of matter, and all of it in sort of a hologram or a projection. Now I'm talking about a future world essentially that doesn't exist yet, but it's kind of like in the movie Star Trek, one of the earlier or one of the more recent ones. They have Spock in this little chamber, and there's all these sort of holograms floating around him, teaching him the nature of the universe essentially. And this is kind of the idea: is to have either a projection or a hologram that is able to show you in 3 dimensions the nature of different states of matter and diffusion of energy and electricity and these things that really require a certain amount of visual experience to be able to more intuitively understand. And from there you get, when a child has graduated from this and has learned to express themselves effectively, both and at a more sort of intuitive level, they then reach into the level of the trivium, which is the logical component, which is sort of the mastery of their ability to express themselves and to learn new information. That's a very important aspect of this, is to reach a level of coming to terms with other people through things like logic and rhetoric, and the ability to really inhabit the sort of intellectual capacity that's necessary to reach to higher levels of spiritual, and really it does cut out a lot of the bullshit, because at that point you can teach yourself. You can start to teach yourself, and others can teach each other.
Shave back the ego, right?
It really sort of becomes a reciprocal, and this is the other thing. It brings reciprocity into the picture as well. It is a feedback loop of reciprocity, and you do unto yourself as you would have as you would have others do unto you. And so what this ends up doing is, of course, you lead that into the scientific understanding of the universe through the math, geometry, music, and astronomy in the quadrivium. And once you've been educated in this way, you can more you reach a cosmic understanding of your place in the universe. And at that point, you can't be a slave. Nobody can enslave you when you realize that you are a cosmic being and that the cosmos is so vast compared to where we are in this little patch, that this little sandbox, and that it is not permanent, certainly. That we are not the only civilization in the universe, and that we have to grow up to be able to even have a conversation with those people. So that is a sort of those two components, the trivium and quadrivium, are the greatest legacy from the ancient times that we could possibly embrace in our time.
I agree.
Other than certain sort of native concepts like Mother Earth, for instance. I mean, those also have huge implications and are extremely necessary to the overall progress. Now, what follows, I created a sort of process of self-mastery and self-education, which I call the Pentivium. The Pentivium is a process of purification. So you purify yourself from our culture, from the technocratic sort of system, from the technology, and really from any influence, essentially. Try to purify yourself from the influences of the world. You can purify your body, your mind, and your spirit. So all three of these things need to be considered in order to really truly purify yourself. If you are corrupt in any way, you're not going to be able to perceive the truth in the way that is needed in order for you to actually recognize it. It's basically taking a scientific perspective. No matter how lunatic the evidence is, you have to accept the result. You have to accept the reality. The lunatic suggestion that I'm trying to make is that there is a spark of God, consciousness, or mind in all of us, and that is essentially the ultimate truth spiritually, that we are avatars and that God is playing all of us. And so my whole suggestion is essentially that we are like it's a force of nature. It's not something that we can say is just like this moldable piece of clay robot, that it's just a electrical meat pocket or something that is just kind of like floating around on a planet. It's actually much closer to, we are God playing a video game, a cosmic sort of video game. And at that point, it makes it so, obviously human life is sacred at that point. It's not something that should be dominated and controlled. It should be something that is radically free. And unfortunately, what that does is radical freedom is dangerous, and it is like being naked in the forest. There are dangers to having total freedom. Embracing those dangers and overcoming them is the challenge of our species, and that's why we're all born babies. That's the whole prank of it all. Let's see if they can do it. that's the ultimate cosmic prank, and you have to hand it to our sort of creator. It has a pretty funny, radical, because if we don't, how'd they all die? Oh, well, they didn't get the joke. They didn't get it. Sorry, start over? Okay, yeah, why not?
They gotta have cute babies so that the parents don't kill them.
Well, of course, right, of course, so I don't really, yeah, I mean, so,
you're cute.
Right. So, I mean, the God sort of component to this is an essential aspect, and of course, the liberal element of our society, being what it is, antithetical to this, is largely hedonistic, unfortunately, and given to a sort of laissez-faire, don't give a shit, as long as you aren't affecting my life, I don't really give a fuck what you do, kind of way of dealing with all of this sort of corruption and what you could... Sin is defined esoterically as missing the mark. Mm-hmm. Missing the mark. It's not because you did some bad... You're bad. I care if you masturbate. It's not... That's not the sin. The sin is missing the mark and not realizing that you have a spark of God in you and denying that. That's the sin. Mm-hmm. The ignorance of God is the sin. Because it's so self-evident. And
they spend all this time and resources and energy trying to basically close your connection off to that spark.
Try to close you off. And so what the
Punished.
Exactly. So the Pentivium is essentially about, like I said, that purification, reaching the point where you can actually entertain a thought without having to believe it, but you can also be open-minded enough to entertain a thought. Because more often than not, people do not entertain ideas that are counter to what they have been trained to believe. Now, the second stage of this is an accumulation of knowledge, of course. Once you've purified yourself, you now have to fill the cup. You've emptied out the cup, now fill the cup. The cup, you have to accumulate knowledge, read books, become aware of yourself, learn who you are. Books are not going to teach you everything. You have to learn for yourself who and what you are to a certain degree. But there are a lot of people, luckily, who've done a lot of, work to try to bring the truth to you. Embrace that. Embrace the opportunity to learn. The third stage then is, of course, the exertion of that knowledge, the application of the knowledge. You can't just continuously take and take and take. You have to then process that information vis-a-vis the logic component through the trivium, process that information, and through rhetoric, express that, or through other means, express what you have learned. One of the greatest things that I think that has been a result of the sort of thinking and modern day thinking is permaculture. Permaculture is a huge thing that is not well understood by a lot of popular. It's not a popular idea, but it is, I think, the way to creating the planetary organism in terms of the agricultural component, the economics of a lot of it. Because if we have a permaculture, and it's not just in the sense of agriculture, a permanent culture, a permanent civilization.
I completely agree. I think the whole thing with Agenda 2030, and they're we need these gigantic overarching, no, what you need is you need to completely decentralize agriculture and get small scale regenerative agriculture and permaculture farms. Take all the money that's going into subsidies to corn, wheat, and soy, and redirect all of it into small-scale farms across America, and within 5 years, we'll,
Absolutely.
The
beauty of it is
Can't
that
have that though.
the beauty of it, the beauty of where we are. See, this is the other thing that when I in my journey of this sort of process of learning, I've come to the realization that capitalism was a necessary step. We have the infrastructural, technological sort of capability at this point to do it kind of easy. We could do it really easy. It's just a matter of a switch in the mind. A simple, it's really that. It's not going to require massive, huge project. We've already done it all. We've already done all that. So at this point, it's just a matter of turning the switch from dark, evil consciousness or just the demented, fear-based mentality to love and permaculture and the embrace of the human spirit. And it's over. Love and trust is really what it takes. And once we embrace those aspects of ourselves, because they're inherent aspects of ourselves, then and I mean on the whole, the majority of the population of the planet, obviously the Homo oppressus, it doesn't have that dominating their consciousness, and that's why these people need to be put away, unfortunately, into maybe a nursing or some kind of facility that will be able to cater to their needs.
Yeah.
Their very special needs.
You can go live on Mars, you know.
Maybe they can live on Mars.
Yeah.
Hey, I don't really care as long as they're not affecting my future and the future of my children. Thanks.
We'll put them into hard labor and
Right. We give them a little bit of their own medicine, maybe, but we have to have compassion for the evil Thanatos sort of mentality that has overgrown. See, this is the thing. There needs to be a culling. There does need to be a brush fire of that. Mm-hmm. They've tried to brush fire this.
Predatory class.
Yeah.
The predatory class needs to be definitely outed. That's really all it needs to be, is outed. Once it's outed, that's all it takes.
We need to dox them all.
Right. Oh, hey, and I mean, the thing is, it would be nice if it's already there. Actually, Mel Gibson's trying to sort of dox them with the documentary with the Rothschilds.
Is it a documentary?
I think it might be a movie, actually.
Oh,
But
yeah,
if it's a movie, all the better, right? It's just
him and Shia
theatrical.
LaBeouf, I saw a picture.
Is it out?
I don't think
No.
it's out yet, but it's in this. But I mean, the fact that that's even a thing
Yeah.
is a huge,
They're making a
huge
movie
thing. And
about
of course they're
international
gonna.
bankers called Rothschild.
Anytime you bring up Rothschild, there's the whole idea of anti-Semitism. But the reality is, in order for it to be anti-Semitism, they have to be Semites.
Not Khazarians.
They're not even Semites. They're using the deception of that to be able to say we're this whole other class of people that you can't make fun of. Yeah, and the whole cancel culture is like is basically based in that originally. The ACLU and the Anti-Defamation League and all the rest of it. That's essentially created, and originally was actually created because of blood libel.
Oh
The
yeah.
ACLU because of blood libel claims that were alleged for a Jewish man who had killed. He was a
The little girl.
He was a pencil. Yeah, he was a pencil maker, pencil factory maker, and there was a little girl that all the evidence basically led to him killing her and taking all of her blood.
Huh.
And yeah, so
And he ended up getting prosecuted, but then the ACLU.
they killed him afterwards. Yes, he won. He won the case or whatever, but they ended up creating a mob and basically just killing him.
And then
publicly.
the ACLU formed and kind of came in and gave him like they cleared his name. So
They
to speak.
cleared right.
The ACLU. That's how the ACLU formed.
That's how they formed. Yes.
Disgusting.
awful.
Historical
Was it
facts.
no, it's the ADL.
ADL, the ADL,
Anti-defamation.
Anti-Defamation League.
Oh, yeah,
Anti-Defamation
yeah.
League,
Oh,
yes.
Oh, they're
ADL,
deep in
I was
it.
gonna
didn't
say.
know that, though.
Yeah, ADL, yeah,
I didn't
ACLU,
know
no, yeah,
that's
ACLU is a
how it
college.
began.
It's
Yeah.
ACLU is the American Civil Liberties Union.
Okay,
Right,
well,
yeah.
I don't
okay.
know a lot about them, but they do seem to bring cogent points up sometimes.
yeah. I'm sure
Yeah.
that they're actually
They're a
they-
mixed
ADL,
bag,
ADL,
the
ADL.
ACL.
My apologies
Yeah.
for using
I
the wrong.
I
acronym.
might have even turned that in. I don't know who did
Right.
it first, but either way.
It's
Right.
one of those alphabet soup agencies.
Yeah,
out there.
exactly. So. The whole truth of the matter is that the Zionism is sort of a deception inherently by these very high level money people that ultimately end up having a lot of and so okay, so then the
Before you get too far
Yeah.
off that, one quote I thought was appropriate. Anti-Semitism doesn't denote people who hate Jews, but people who the Jews do not like.
oh well there you go exactly
Yeah, right.
yes. Any opinion that
Right.
the sort of the Jewish mafia we could say
Yeah,
the
the
Zionist
Zionists.
Jewish mafia
Yeah.
essentially
It's not the innocent
does
people
not
of
like
Israel,
certain people saying certain things about certain people of their order. Okay,
By
so
the way, look outside for a second.
was it snowing a lot?
Yeah.
Oh, as well. Dang.
It slowed
April
down a little
Fool.
bit, but it was like a second ago.
It's
popping.
So we as we okay, so then the okay, so the pentibium. The pentibium, you acquire knowledge, and then at a certain point you have to reach a level of balance with this whole process. Otherwise, you'll go crazy and burn out. Purification is the three components are sort of interrelated. You have to be constantly purifying yourself, constantly. It's a very critical and intense process, but it's the process that is largely described in the book Think on These Things by Jiddu Krishnamurti. Jiddu Krishnamurti, hugely influential person in my personal philosophy and spiritual journey, because his ultimate sort of position is that you have to think for yourself. That's what how.
You must not do that today,
right.
according to Forbes and all the media.
Right.
You must leave that to
Right.
the experts.
It's too dangerous.
Thinking
And,
has been linked to all these different
Right,
side
right.
effects.
and okay, so and balance is also a fundamental aspect of the human experience, and we have to embrace balance. Balance is something that when we come to a state of flow, the flow state, that unlocks a key potential in the human mind and the human spirit, which is essentially that you become confident, and you no longer have a fear of what will happen to you, because you are balanced, because you have the ability to flow with whatever happens to you no matter what. And in that state of flow, we reach a kind of level of higher intelligence as well. That like you were saying, tapping into the higher mind is this flow state. And so in that, you reach a level that changes you from an NPC drone, potentially, to a original character. No longer are you living as a pawn of someone else's scripted version of your life. You are creating your own reality and your own life for yourself. That is the essence of sovereignty. That is the essence of self-ownership. And if you can reach that level of play, you're also connected to God, because the whole purpose of this is to play. And the essence of the Spirit of God is a playful nature. Hence the prankster, hence the, why we even laugh, and why we have this sort of capacity for emotion and mind in the first place.
The Alan Watts bit about the carrot.
Oh, right.
Like chasing the carrot. Yeah. It was a song and dance you were supposed to play along the way.
Exactly. It's not about the end sort of product. It's about the whole process of the dance and the living quality of life as a phenomenon is the play of it. And to embrace the essence of play is to embrace the essence of life. Now, part of that also is if you really are playing life, you have to embrace death. Mm-hmm. You have to embrace death in the sense that you have to recognize that you are inevitably going to die. Inevitably. To embrace that fact gives you freedom in a deeper way than almost any other way that you can attain a sense of freedom, is to embrace the fact that you are only here for a very temporary time. And so the whole point is to live life to its fullest as much as possible. What we're doing as a species is allowing ourselves to be domesticated to a point where we don't even know what that is. And play has been
this last year.
This whole past last year, essentially, all humanity has been removed from the human experience. No more music, no more expression, no more group experiences. We have been atomized. And in order for us to truly embrace our humanity, we have to obviously network and branch out, which is obviously what we're doing right now, and why this kind of thing is important. And why we have to sort of create new communities as well. The whole freedom cell aspect of this. And so okay. Then after the Pentivium, there is, of course, because once you reach a level of everybody being sort of practitioners of this kind of way of living and way of thinking, you reach a point where I as an individual have become a player. Now players have to interact and create the new world, the Ivium, the aesthetic, the beautiful world, the brighter world that we can all create. And a part of that process, of course, is to strategize. Part of the process is to reach a strategic goal of success for what that whole sort of process is going to create. A better world. And a part of that, I think, honestly, at this point, is we have to combine various techniques. We can't just protest and be like, we don't want to have this thing. It literally has to, at a certain point, be replacing the system altogether. Like the Black Panthers did it, and that's the best goal I can think of, the best version of what I'm thinking of. But as far as militarism and stuff, that's counterproductive. But at the same time, that is a huge example of where people took control of their own lives and were able to actually be pretty successful at it, if it weren't for the fact that the government was
COINTELPRO.
You can't do that. Yeah. So.
And I wouldn't even describe. I mean, I guess it's fair to say they were militant, but they were definitely
not for.
They were not on the offensive.
Oh, for sure. And they didn't have. It's not like they didn't have a good reason to be. They knew what they were dealing with. They were being realistic, if anything. It's
and they
realistic.
didn't actually kill anybody, though.
Oh, right.
Got killed.
Right. If anything, the government is pretty religiously active at killing people who are Christ-like, essentially, and that's kind of been the nature of government since. Gee, I don't know, Rome. Have you seen that? Yeah, exactly. Pretty standard operation. Okay, so, and so we have to strategize. We have to sort of beat them at their own game in a lot of ways. The reality is they've planned this out for a pretty long time. If we go by the 2,000-year sort of standard, this Luciferian, like I said, it's not a one person. It is the Antichrist essence of the human spirit that is creating this. It is the sort of Luciferian anti-human component of the human psyche, or of the metaphysics that created this universe. I mean that goes into a whole other, that's the meeting on Friday or whatever. That's
Worship
tomorrow.
of the darkness.
Right.
That's the light. Yeah.
Right. That's a whole other talk that could be had. I'm not a preacher. I don't claim to be like a guru or a preacher or anything, but I happen to have learned a lot of things. That's all I'm saying. So the strategizing and organizing. So I'll go through the stages: strategy, organization, education, synergy, dissemination, and then transcendence. Okay, so we have to strategize the way to creating a planetary organism. Once you have the idea of a planetary organism in mind, it makes it a lot easier to plan for the planetary organism, for it to be sort of manifested. So that's like the first aspect of it, is to even just get that into the lexicon. Planetary organism versus world government. That fundamental distinction needs to be made and understood at a very basic level for all people, because it's there.
Would you kind of like positively conflate planetary organism with Walter Russell's The Universal One?
I've never heard of it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It may be a full-on other discussion we'll have later.
Okay.
Yeah. But,
Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's what we amount to is essentially the pollination for the universal sort of. We're like the sperm of the planetary organism, and we are sort of expected to thrush out into the universe and to create new planetary organisms, and for it to sort of propagate in that way. But what we're thinking about doing with like Elon Musk and everything is transporting the world organism or the world government to another planet because we fucked this one up. Like that's not how you do it. Okay, God damn it. That's you missed the whole point, and you're going backwards. If anything, you're going in order to go forward, you're going backwards. You're going to colonize a whole other planet in a stupid way, and you're going to make a whole other. It's mind-boggling.
We can put all our trash there.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's like the idiocracy. Like
Right.
we're reaching a level where if we don't take the reins, this shit's gonna just go off the cliff. And I can't put it any more simply. It's just that's where we are.
I kind of feel like it's already falling off the cliff. We just haven't hit the ground yet.
Well, that's the way I put it. But the only way that we're gonna survive is if we put our seatbelts on, and at least and
Learn how to brace the fall.
Brace the fall by getting in,
by
by reaching flow, by being fluid.
Okay,
Fluid.
can I ask a question?
Sure.
Do you think there are already enough of us and we're simply not focused and organized?
We are like a
because
tree
if
without.
there's just a few
sure.
of us, they're just gonna kill us. Like,
Sure.
are there?
There is a tree, but without a trunk. Many branches, but no central trunk. What I'm trying to provide with this is the trunk, the Ivium, the way of living. It's like the economia of Aristotle. It's the way of living. If we live by this code, we can achieve the freedom. It's as simple as that. If we become our own philosophers, if we become our own sovereigns, we transcend the problem. But if we acquiesce and allow ourselves to become domesticated humans, we will be enslaved. This is the balance of reality.
Yeah.
If you give in to the darkness will win. And you will have to end up suffering very gravely to get out of that dark age. Inevitably, it may happen through works of. But if these are restricted, like in A Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, A Brave New World, basically all knowledge, all wisdom was restricted. Shakespeare, no, you have to just be the cog, and if you're not the cog, well, we have a medicine for you. It's called LSD, and you're just gonna go on a little trip, and you're just gonna pass away, or heroin. Medical heroin can be provided
Oh yeah.
to who at Soma, essentially is what it was called in the book. But you go on a holiday, and then you feel so much better about the way the world is. And so pharmacological enslavement essentially is what we're talking about in A Brave New World, which is so apparent today, but we are desensitized to it. the reality is if you brought somebody from that was an adult during the 1920s and showed them the world of today, they'd be flabbergasted, as they would say. They would be totally astonished because we live in a totally different world that is unfamiliar and very exotic and alien to something that like horse and buggy. You look at the Amish essentially, and that's the difference. We live in a totally different world from only a generation or two ago, really. And that's what the desensitization to this whole apparatus and how it works is a fundamental part of how it operates. We have to be more desensitized. That's why it's repetitive. That's why it needs to be repetitive and addictive in order for us to be so desensitized. It's designed that way. And so, so the other part of it then is education. So this is why I'm doing this class, essentially, is to educate other people in this specifically. This process, I believe, is the fundamental aspect, at least in terms of like getting it all started. It's the generating force, the care that is necessary to actually start living by these principles, as opposed to just knowing the idea behind it and just kind of like, okay, well, I know that's true, but there isn't a fight in anybody. We have to be like lions. We have to be sort of have a component, have an aspect of ourself that is willing to fight to the death to achieve worldwide freedom. And that's what I'm calling the quest in this RPG, if we're gonna, if I may, is essentially the main quest is to free the slaves in this game. That's the ultimate quest for those of us who are actualized players in it, is to free the slaves. This
at
is
all costs.
at all costs, because if we don't, then essentially what we're doing is ensuring that the future is one for there very well may not be a future because of the level of technocracy at that point. It really does have the potential to be a permanent tyranny, not a permanent culture, mind you, not a permaculture, but a perma-tyranny. In which case we will have a very hard time trying to get the hell out of that. We have dystopian movies about the equilibrium essentially. Yes, that's very So we have this we have this fork in the road that we need to be able to put on the seat. Yeah, we're kind of already off the cliff. Honestly, with the COVID thing and people being mask wearers and stuff like that, we are on the abyss, if not already hanging over.
Our heels in.
So now is the time to start to. I mean, honestly, I wish that this had been. I didn't even really. I had this. This is a 5-year-old book. I wrote this 5 years ago, and I had been reading this along the same amount of time. So I mean, like that. This is why when I think about all this, it's like, okay, here it comes. I was already ready for it. I already knew that it was. I was already defining it. Hell, I was defining it 12 years ago. So I mean, for me, this is like, it's really just all confirmation for my own,
it's been a progression.
It has, it's been definitely like more and more obvious as it becomes, but still, I see people who are just completely oblivious, and so it's very problematic because it shouldn't be hard to see, really.
Yeah.
If you pay any attention at all and put any effort into it, then it's not hard to see. But most people don't want to do that. And they just want to listen to their 5 minutes of media and then go, okay, well, that's what they said today, so I'll do that today. Like the people that are triple masking because that's what the TV says.
Exactly.
Yeah,
right.
Triple mask. You know what would be more effective? If you duct tape a pillow to your face, that's 100% effective. It's
Right.
genius, right?
Also, when you need to go to sleep, it's just
right. Like, oh God.
You might accidentally die.
Yeah.
And okay, so in
Side
addition,
effects include.
so education and media are kind of intertwined, and a lot of it, we kind of almost have to master the art of public relations. Public relations has to do with essentially using the God component of emotions against the organism, but if we can do it in a white hat way to tell truth,
deflective.
propaganda can be very effective technique of activating human beings, but it depends on obviously how you go about it. It's like with a joke; it's very nuanced. You have to be able to express the idea, like Joe Biden's 120 years in the Senate. It's not a good enough exaggeration to be funny. It just seemed like you were having a brain fart.
Yeah.
And said 120 years Anyway.
I'm waiting for somebody to edit the bats flying.
Right. So to bring people in, you have to seem like an approachable person. Synergy is a huge component of any movement. We have to be able to be approachable and bring people
it's part
into
of the
this.
Beauty requirement,
The beauty, exactly. It's this, and not only that, but to show people, or to theorize a more beautiful world, to make people recognize how ugly this one is.
Sure.
Ugly this one is, and to realize that there is a brighter future that we can inhabit if we so choose, if we choose the right decisions. And what I'd like to say is, this world, reality itself, can be a heaven or a hell, a prison or paradise, depending upon the choices we make and the perspectives we take. And that's what it comes down to. And what we have to do at a certain point is, once we've synergized, brought all the many puzzle pieces that are required to make it a possible reality together, we bring them together, and then we start disseminating the truth in a wholesale, we have our own media, we have our own money, we have our own economy system sort of way. To systemize it and to really organize it, have it be very well organized, because like I said, we're competing against people who are very well organized and have a very long legacy already that the whole thing is set up for them to win. We have to be able to do a better job. And we can, because we are, like you said, they're homo oppress us. They're actually worse. They're psychopaths. Like, they're evil. So inherently there is some kind of degenerative quality to their thinking and to their mentality. Whereas because we are more of in alignment with the true nature of humanity, we can actually bring everybody together. They have to divide us all. We can actually, that's way more powerful. Way more powerful of a force of nature if we all are working together and acting together as a single species, as a planetary organism.
If we can get to the point where we don't require the system that they've set up to enslave us, and that's essentially what we want to do through Freedom Cells, right? And
Yes.
That's a lot of what...
And that's essentially what this is the funny thing. Freedom Cells is essentially, like, I was thinking about this when I was writing this.
Sure.
This is a part of the Mastermind Alliance, is what Zizek, the guy who created the book Flow, he wrote about Csikszentmihalyi, I think is his name. So he's basically talking about, and so is Napoleon Hill or various others, basically talking about the mastermind. You have the capacity, when you bring people together who are players, like I was talking about, who have reached a level of original characterhood, you bring those people together, there's something higher that's created. It's the communion factor. It's like the church, essentially. The idea of, like, behind the church is that when we all are communing and recognizing the Spirit of God, there is something greater that occurs. We are a cell at that point, not individuals, but something of a higher order. And that when we do this kind of activity as that, not as just socializing, how was your week? Oh, it was great. Oh, that's wonderful. but actually coming together to recognize the truth and the beauty,
almost the power
and the
of
spirit,
prayer, kind of
the
direction.
power of prayer, and that it has to be sort of directed and guided. It can't, and you have to be strategic and organizing with it. It has to be of a higher intelligence is created with this, and it has to be respected as such. And so this is the sort of the synergy component of all of that, which ultimately results in the dissemination and the creation and the strategy of how are we going to beat these fuckers who just keep on oppressing us? How do we do it? Because we haven't done it yet. And it's been like 2,000 years, and Christ was like, hey man, there's these guys over there, they're trying to fuck you in the butt. You might want to try to stop them. And we just can't get it together. But there's an evolution to this, so you have to be patient. Obviously, it couldn't happen then. It has to be in our time that we do this, but it has to be in our time. It's not. We can't let it be up to our children again, because that's what they said about me and my generation, and you and your generation.
But we pass it on to them.
We pass it on.
Improve, but we set the standard.
We never set the standard. So the whole idea then is to the transcendence factor of all of this involves us. We have to have the big picture end goal in mind. That perfection has to be in mind in order for us to create the univium. The univium, like I said, is the end goal of all. Is the aesthetic, the beauty of the world that is inside of us. if we can embrace it. That is the end goal. And it's only going to be possible if, like I said, we have to sort of be more disciplined. There's a certain amount of discipline and suffering that has to go along with this. It's kind of inherent to the whole process, unfortunately, but fortunately as well, because it's part of the play. If we can embrace it as a game, I like to think of it as an MMORPG sort of LARP. If we embrace it as a LARP, we can have fun with it. It's like the zombie apocalypse. If somebody comes and breaks into your door, into your house, and it's like, oh my God, there's zombies outside. Come with me. We gotta survive. It's like, dude, I don't want to survive. Just go, dude. Let me just sort of I'll take whatever, man. I don't want to be in that. Like, are you gonna have a toilet? No. Are you gonna have fresh water? No. Are you gonna have a car? No. Are you gonna have anything that's really anything that we had at middle school camp when we were 6? No. I don't really want to. No, thanks. I just gotta. Well, yeah, but we can kill zombies together. Dude, you should have led with that! Hell yeah, let's go! Let's kill some zombies! Yeah. I'm taking that from Caleb City. He's like a YouTuber. Mm-hmm. That's a great skit. It's totally... Yes, we need to embrace this whole, terrifying reality as a LARP. And yes, be willing to die! No, there aren't any start-overs, I'm sorry. Yeah, right. There's no save points, there's no start-overs, but that should be the goal. And to embrace it as a live-action role-play game. Sure. To embrace it as such. And to if anything, be like, well, since all of this is just a bunch of sandcastles, why don't we create the most fun and interesting thing we can?
Yeah.
Shit!
We were talking about reframing problems on the way up, too. And, I like the idea of, you take instead of saying, we're going for, doomsday prepping, we're going for homesteading. And homesteading and doomsday prepping actually have a lot of very similar goals, right. Except it's the outlook. You're not hoarding things and eye on your neighbor right. with your guns out. You're homesteading. You're I'm creating all of this beautiful stuff that I can give to my community and my children.
Absolutely, and this is the power of words and language. Mm-hmm. The power of words and language cannot be underestimated. I mean, that's why I think the other thing that one of the sort of basic readings happens to be the trivium. This is the stuff that we need to, and I'm trying to read. This honestly is a very difficult book. This is a very difficult book to read. It's very technical because of the grammar aspect of it, but it's a worthwhile read because you come to realize that there's certain aspects of our very existence that are contained within language, like the idea of the phantasm. It's an idea of you have an object, let's say if I say painting, the image that comes to mind in your mind is called a phantasm. You have this internalized structure of the world around you, and if we can change that structure through language, like I was saying, world government versus planetary organism, we can guide the overall outcome through our language, and it's the language that we use that ultimately creates the culture and the world that we live in. And what's happened is that culture and language have deteriorated. Look at language today.
It's mud.
I sort of sharpen my teeth on Thomas Jefferson and the Enlightenment period sort of writings. And if you sharpen your teeth on that, all the other stuff becomes easy. Mm-hmm. It's so much easier to read modern stuff. And it's because the reason that is because they try to dumb it down. Mm-hmm. Why are we even, it's funny because there has been that degradation, that devolution, the sort of the deterioration has occurred. We've allowed ourselves to become dumber and dumber instead of smarter and smarter. And why? Because we've allowed government to legislate morality through the education system. And the Rockefellers, of course. Gates. The money men, the money men. And one of the things I wanted to also say is, okay, so I wrote a poem. I think it's actually on here. But it is In God We Trust. And so whose God is it that we trust? That's not on here. God is guns, oil, and drugs. Mm-hmm. And it's...
I've heard gold, oil, and drugs too.
Gold, oil, and drugs. Yes, mm-hmm. Guns, oil, and drugs. Gold, oil, and drugs. But essentially, it's the truth is, who are we really worshiping when we say that? Who do we really trust in? Mm-hmm. It's not God. It's really that acronym. It's the evil, the devil. The devil is really who's running things. It's not God who's running things. We have trust in the devil and all of his works, essentially. And so the whole money component needs to be wrangled in and recognized for what it is. We have to do that through, like I said, the linguistics. We have to recognize that the fiat, the arbitrary command of money as we know it is just that. It's an arbitrary command. We have the ability to totally revolutionize our entire society through the principles of, like I said, love and trust. Love and trust are what we need to root ourselves in, and to recognize that we shouldn't have to be exchanging these certificates in order to have a reciprocal relationship with each other. The reciprocal relationship is inherent to our very nature. If we embrace that instead of allowing it to be domesticated and certified and at a certain point we're going to internalize that system. And it's going to be digital. And it's going to be a cashless society essentially, but it's not going to be a free society. The only way to have a free society is to have love and trust. That's that.
And guns.
And guns, sure. But I mean, the thing is, guns, when I say guns, I mean like military weapons in the sense of like military oppression.
Okay.
Guns, obviously we need to trust in our own ability to defend ourselves. But I honestly, to a certain degree, my own personal preference is melee weapons. That I like, because if it's going to be a LARP, melee is so much more fun. You're cheating, come on. God damn it, you're cheating.
Sure.
Let's have melee weapons only. That's my own personal opinion. You know, I'm sure I'm going to get flack for that. Some people like guns, but melee seems like so much, because who the hell is actually going to kill each other if there's melee?
Right.
It reduces the opportunity, and you can't really have much accidents with melee weapons.
If one person has guns, then everyone else is going to want guns to level the playing field.
No, then you kill that guy. You kill the guy with the gun, and then you destroy the gun.
Oh, there's...
You could.
It should really be to that point where it's like, hey, look, dude, you're cheating. Get him out of the game. He quit the game. He that's the rule set. If he starts using guns.
Hundreds of millions of guns.
I know.
Billions
But you know what? What a great monument it would be to melt all those down. To our own evolution as a species.
There'd
to
always
melt
be
all those
somebody
fucking
hiding
things
them,
down.
I feel like.
No, of course. But
Yeah.
then you kill that guy. No, I'm not kidding. You kill that guy. Because at that point, they're doing it specifically. You don't hunt. You don't need to hunt with a gun. You can hunt with a bow and arrow.
Yeah.
You can hunt with other means. The combustible engine type weapon is so much more destructive than any other, and it also missiles and all everything beyond the projectile sort of weapon, like a combustible weapon like that. It sort of defies I think, like I said, this is my personal opinion. I'm not trying to, whatever. It's just like that my own ethical perspective about all that is like it's just not fair anymore, man. Because it's like bringing a gun to a knife fight. It's like, dude, seriously, you're fucking cheating, bro. Like, come on. It's like, yeah, but it's all fair in love and war, and it's like,
taking a lot of I have the samurai sword broken in half tattooed on my legs, and part of the idea is the end of honorable battle when someone would stand up and be like, I'll fight you with my sword, you fight me with your sword, and now they have this thing where it takes very little skill to point and pull a trigger at somebody, and so you've taken a lot of the honorable, took 15 years of my life to learn how to wield this weapon, and now I'm going to
right, you're gonna shoot me in the chest. Oh,
Yeah.
come on. It's like what is it, Harrison Ford in Indiana
Diarrhea
Jones, right?
when he
He
had
goes,
diarrhea.
he's like, pow, just blows him away. It's just like, okay.
On set he had diarrhea that day, and he just didn't feel like doing the whole. And he's like, "What if I just?
What if I just shoot
Perfect,
him?
do it.
Are
Yeah.
you kidding me?
Yeah.
That's so hilarious. That is so, but yet that is telling something. It's so much more powerful. Can I just do this? You're like, yeah, actually you can.
The dungeon masters.
Right. Okay, we'll allow it. And that's sort of the component of it all. It's like it is kind of like a destruction of the virtue that was martial arts, and that's another aspect of this. Is to reach a sense of self-mastery. You have to have a certain amount of self-confidence as well, and a part of that is the ability of combating another person if necessary, defending yourself. I mean, it's a part of the whole ethic of that is to embrace your own right and ability to defend yourself. Now, again, of course, inherent to that is obviously the idea of, well, if the government's going to have this, then I got to have that, But that's like you're entertaining now an entirely destructive evil force at that point. I feel like, you know what I mean? Like it's like, well, if they're going to have this, then I got to beat them with this, and it's like we're on a planetary organism. What you're basically describing is the heart fighting the lungs. Like that's literally what we're doing with nations at this point. It's like, well, North Korea has this nuclear weapon that we might be able, and if they launch it at us, we have to launch it at them. And if we launch it at them, Russia's gonna launch it, and we got to. It's just like, dude, you've become insane with this overall like, you know, war game scenario. And the other thing is
that's only elite between the elite. Like
right.
These are not even
right.
like.
I don't have any beef with some North Korean dude. You know, somewhere, or you know, some Chinese person.
You need to watch
or,
more TV then.
Right, exactly. You're not afraid of the right people. So I mean, it's very. We have been definitely groomed into this kind of mentality, and we have to desensitize or resensitize. I mean, ourselves to the fact that this is the case, that we've been indoctrinated. And all of these ideas of hatred towards other people is something that has been programmed. And it takes, like, think about it, 12 years to program that. That's how powerful, how much it takes to program. That's how, it's actually very encouraging because, like, it takes so much resources to program these fucking kids to be these monsters. The nature of the human being is to be an incarnation of God, and they're trying. It takes like 12 years to turn them into these monsters, and so that's the we have to have a goal in mind, and sort of the freeing of the slaves has to be sort of or the subjects or we're subjected or subjugated. The subjugated population has to be emancipated. It has to be freed by a new form of education. I call it the Ivium. You can really call it whatever you want. I mean, I'm just using classical sort of Latin or Greek sort of derivation for the word, but it is sort of just a way of living, essentially, a new way of living that is inherently capable of freeing the individual from the existing program of the world order. They're trying to turn us into NPCs, and what I'm trying to do is turn us all into original characters. Do you want to be an original character in the game of life? Here's how. Here's actually how. No, I don't want to be an original character. That's dangerous. Dangerous freedoms that come along with that. Yes, it is. It to a certain extent, it comes with a lot of responsibility. You can respond to a lot more when you are actualized, fully actualized through the understanding of like spiritual concepts that transcend a lot of this shit. You really can. And like a lot of that has to do with becoming into nature, going into nature and embracing our fragility in the scheme of things. Like I said, sort of understanding that we are temporary, we're going to die, so you may as well make it interesting. Shit. Otherwise, one of my favorite quotes is, "He not busy being born is busy dying," by Bob Dylan in one of his songs. Mm-hmm. He not busy being born is busy dying. And a part of all of this, I guess, also, I'll sort of finish with this. Let me see the minutes, though. A part of this whole thing is that I think I really sort of covered it all, but is to realize that there is something after this also. Because if we existed as this sort of greater mind before, what the brain acts like, and one of the other books that I don't have here but is sort of important, I think, to this whole thing is The Doors of Perception by Aldous Huxley. He describes the mind of the human being as such that it is a restricting valve to the larger consciousness system. And that this restricting valve, that explains the whole like amnesia of birth. That we don't have a modicum of knowledge that we have when we are outside of this organism. But when we leave this mortal coil, we become what we were before, the primordial essence, the primordial consciousness, and we return to something and it is just like when we wake up from a dream, and of course, a return. It's not a terrifying experience. It's a return home. really to what we are beyond this. And that transcendence is liberating, very liberating if we embrace it. If we reject that transcendence and that realization, then we become subject and subjugated to a higher or to an authority of man as opposed to authority of God.